Hey guys, tonight we begin with something a little darker. A time of divine punishment, simmering revolutions, and dangerous innovation. We're diving into what life was really like for a visionary born 2 centuries too early. Forget the sleek rockets and electric dreams we know today. The truth? You probably wouldn't survive a single year as a genius in 1800. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe to Chronicles of Chaos. Let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from tonight. Are you somewhere warm? Somewhere safe? Good. Hold on to that feeling. Now, dim the lights, close your eyes if you need to, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Congratulations. You've just woken up in the year 1800 in Bavaria. The good news? You have the mind of Elon Musk. The bad news? You're about to discover what it means to be a genius born in the wrong century. You are 10 years old and your name is Elon Musk. But this isn't the Elon Musk you know. This is a boy born in Munich in 1790, the son of Heinrich Musk, a clockmaker whose delicate hands can make time itself dance in mechanical perfection. Your mother, Maria, died giving birth to your younger sister 3 years ago. She never lived to see the strange drawings you make, the impossible machines you sketch in the margins of your Bible. The Bavaria of your childhood is a world caught between epochs. Outside your window, horse-drawn carriages clatter over cobblestone streets that have remained unchanged for centuries. The Holy Roman Empire still exists, though it trembles on the edge of dissolution. Napoleon's armies are reshaping Europe like a child rebuilding a sandcastle, and every day brings news of battles fought with muskets and cannons that would seem primitive even to a medieval knight. Your father's workshop occupies the ground floor of your 3-story house on Residenzstrasse. The smell that defines your childhood is brass shavings mixed with lamp oil, a metallic sweetness that clings to your clothes and follows you everywhere. The sound of tiny gears clicking into place fills your days like a mechanical lullaby, punctuated by your father's gentle humming as he works. Heinrich Musk is a man of infinite patience and growing concern. He watches his 10-year-old son with the careful attention of someone who recognizes genius but fears its consequences. While other boys your age are content to wind the clocks and polish the brass cases, you disassemble the mechanisms completely, studying each component as if it holds the secrets of the universe. And perhaps it does. Your first memory of feeling different from other children comes during a Sunday service at the Frauenkirche. Father Benedict is delivering a sermon about the miraculous nature of divine creation, how God moves the heavens with invisible hands, how the celestial bodies dance to music only angels can hear. But as you sit in the hard wooden pew, your mind is calculating orbital mechanics you don't yet have names for. You see the pattern, the way planets must move in ellipses rather than circles, the mathematical relationship between distance and gravitational pull, the possibility that the same forces governing falling apples also control the motion of the moon. These insights come to you not as revelations, but as obvious truths, as clear as the fact that water flows downhill. When you try to explain these ideas to your catechism teacher, Brother Thomas, he stares at you for a long moment before making the sign of the cross. He tells you that such thoughts are dangerous, that questioning God's mysterious ways is the first step toward damnation. He assigns you extra prayers and warns your father that your mind may be too curious for your own good. But your father recognizes something in your eyes that goes beyond simple curiosity. Heinrich Musk sees the look of someone who has glimpsed the hidden mechanisms behind apparent miracles. It's the same expression he wears when solving particularly complex clockwork problems, the face of a mind that refuses to accept surface explanations. Your drawings become more elaborate as your 11th birthday approaches. Carriages that move without horses, their wheels turned by some invisible force. Flying machines with wings that beat like birds, but bodies made of wood and metal. Most disturbing of all, vessels designed to leave Earth entirely, carried aloft by controlled explosions that push against the very air itself. These sketches fill the margins of every book you own, creep across the walls of your bedroom, cover scraps of paper that you hide beneath loose floorboards. When your younger sister Catherine discovers one of your flying machine designs, she runs crying to your father, claiming that you're drawing pictures of demons. The confrontation that follows shapes the rest of your childhood. Heinrich Musk sits you down in his workshop, surrounded by the familiar comfort of ticking clocks and gleaming brass, and asks you to explain what you're drawing. Not to judge or condemn, but to understand. You begin hesitantly, describing how you imagine the flying machines would work. Wings that catch the wind like sails, but positioned to push downward against the air. Bodies made light but strong, like the hollow bones of birds. Engines that burn fuel to create thrust, similar to the way cannons propel cannonballs but in a controlled, continuous manner. Your father listens without interruption, occasionally asking questions that show he's following your logic. When you finish, he's quiet for several minutes, studying your drawings with the same concentration he brings to repairing the most delicate timepieces. "Elon," he says finally, "these ideas, they're not impossible, they're just early. It's the first time anyone has treated your visions as engineering problems, rather than symptoms of madness or divine intervention." Your father doesn't understand the specific principles you're describing, but he recognizes the methodical thinking behind them. He sees that you're not fantasizing about magic, but trying to solve mechanical puzzles using logic and observation. That conversation becomes the foundation of everything that follows. Heinrich Musk begins bringing you books from the university library, works on natural philosophy and mechanical engineering that most children wouldn't encounter until their teenage years. He teaches you to read technical drawings, to understand the relationship between design and function, to think systematically about complex problems. But he also warns you about the dangers of thinking too far ahead of your time. Bavaria in 1801 is a society that fears rapid change. The French Revolution has shown what happens when old certainties are overthrown too quickly. The Catholic Church maintains strict control over education and intellectual discourse, viewing new ideas as potential threats to social stability. Even legitimate scientific inquiry must be conducted carefully, framed in terms that don't challenge religious orthodoxy or political authority. Your father explains this reality during long evening conversations in his workshop. While his hands continue their delicate work, he tells you about Galileo's persecution for claiming that Earth moves around the sun, about scientists who were forced to recant discoveries that contradicted official doctrine, about inventors whose innovations were suppressed because they threatened established interests. "Intelligence without wisdom is dangerous," he says, adjusting a microscopic gear. "But wisdom without courage is useless. You must learn to be both intelligent and wise, both visionary and practical." These lessons guide your behavior as you enter adolescence. You continue developing your mechanical insights, but you learn to present them carefully, framing revolutionary ideas in conservative language. When you design improvements to clock mechanisms, you describe them as refinements rather than innovations. When you sketch flying machines, you call them studies in avian anatomy. Your reputation in Munich grows carefully controlled. Teachers at the cathedral school recognize your mathematical abilities, but see them as gifts to be channeled toward acceptable pursuits like engineering or architecture. Your fellow students admire your mechanical skills while remaining slightly afraid of your intensity. You're known as the Musk boy who can fix anything, who understands machines better than most adults, who asks questions that make grown men uncomfortable. But your true intellectual development happens in secret, during long nights spent reading by candlelight in your bedroom. The books your father brings you open doorways to ideas that seem impossibly advanced. Alessandro Volta's experiments with electric fluid, Luigi Galvani's discoveries about animal electricity, Benjamin Franklin's investigations into the nature of lightning. Electricity fascinates you more than any other subject. Unlike mechanical systems, which operate through visible interactions between solid components, electrical phenomena seem to involve invisible forces that can be stored, directed, and controlled. You spend hours studying Volta's designs for galvanic cells, trying to understand how chemical reactions can generate consistent electrical output. Your first electrical experiment takes place in your father's workshop on a rainy October evening in 1802. Using copper coins, zinc fragments from broken clock weights, and vinegar from your stepmother's kitchen, you construct a simple galvanic cell following Volta's published specifications. The result is a tiny spark when you connect the terminals with an iron wire, barely visible in the lamplight but unmistakably real. You've just generated electricity through chemical action. The implications hit you like physical blows. If chemical reactions can create electrical force, and if electrical force can be controlled and directed, then electricity could potentially power mechanical devices. Not just laboratory curiosities that generate sparks, but practical machines that perform useful work. Carriages that move without horses, mills that operate without water or wind, communication systems that transmit messages faster than any human messenger. The vision that emerges from this insight shapes the rest of your life. You see a world where electrical networks connect every city, where vehicles draw their power from stored lightning, where information travels instantly across any distance. It's a future so far beyond current capabilities that describing it would sound like fantasy, but the underlying principles are as solid as mathematics. You begin conducting more sophisticated electrical experiments, always in secret, always late at night when the rest of the household is asleep. You learn to multiply electrical force by connecting multiple galvanic cells in sequence. You discover that different metals produce different amounts of electrical output. You develop primitive methods for storing electrical charge in makeshift capacitors constructed from metal plates separated by layers of oiled cloth. Most importantly, you solve the fundamental problem of converting electrical energy into mechanical motion. The breakthrough comes accidentally while repairing a clock mechanism damaged by a lightning strike. The spring that drives the clock's escapement has been magnetized by the electrical discharge, causing the gear train to behave erratically. But as you study the magnetized spring, you notice that it attracts and repels iron components in predictable patterns. If magnetism can move metal objects, and if electricity can create magnetism, then electricity could potentially drive mechanical systems. You spend weeks developing this insight, building crude electromagnets using wire coils wrapped around iron cores, demonstrating that electrical current can create controlled magnetic fields. Your first electric motor is barely larger than a pocket watch, constructed from components salvaged from broken clocks and powered by a single galvanic cell. The device consists of a magnetized iron rotor that spins between two electromagnets, switching the current direction manually to maintain continuous rotation. It's primitive by any standard, but it proves that electrical power can be converted into sustained mechanical motion. The motor runs for 3 minutes before the galvanic cell exhausts itself, but those 3 minutes change your understanding of what's possible. You've demonstrated that electricity can power machines, that vehicles could theoretically operate without steam, without combustion, without any visible source of energy. You're 13 years old, and you've just invented electric propulsion. But you're also 13 years old in Bavaria in 1803, and electric propulsion is an idea approximately a century ahead of its time. Your father discovers your electrical experiments when smoke from an overloaded galvanic cell sets off the workshop's primitive fire detection system. Heinrich Musk rushes downstairs expecting to find the building in flames, instead discovering his son surrounded by copper wires, zinc plates, and a device that appears to move without any external force. The conversation that follows is perhaps the most important of your young life. Your father examines your electric motor with the careful attention he normally reserves for the most delicate clock mechanisms. He studies the electromagnets, traces the current flow, observes the rotor's motion with growing amazement. "Elon," he says slowly, "this should not be possible." But he's not questioning your achievement. He's marveling at it. Heinrich Musk possesses enough mechanical knowledge to understand the revolutionary implications of what you've built. Electric motors could power countless applications. Mills and factories could operate without dependence on water or wind. Transportation could be revolutionized. The economic and social effects would be transformative. He also understands the dangers of such a discovery. You must be very careful with this knowledge, he warns. The world is not ready for such innovations. Men have been imprisoned for less threatening ideas. Your father's concern proves prophetic. Within weeks of your motor demonstration, strange rumors begin circulating through Munich's intellectual community. The clockmaker's son has built a machine that moves without apparent power source. Some whisper about mechanical tricks and hidden mechanisms. Others suggest more sinister explanations involving forbidden knowledge and unnatural forces. The attention culminates in an unexpected visit from Father Wilhelm Reichenbach, Munich's chief theological investigator. Father Reichenbach's official role involves examining reports of miraculous events and potential heretical activities, determining whether unusual phenomena have divine, natural, or diabolic origins. Your electric motor definitely qualifies as unusual. The interview takes place in your family's parlor on a cold December afternoon. Father Reichenbach is a scholarly man whose theological training includes extensive study of natural philosophy, making him uniquely qualified to evaluate scientific claims. He examines your motor with professional thoroughness, testing its operation, studying its construction, asking detailed questions about its design principles. You explain the device as honestly as possible, describing galvanic cells, electromagnetic principles, and the conversion of chemical energy into electrical force. Father Reichenbach listens carefully, occasionally asking for clarification about specific technical details. When your demonstration concludes, the priest sits quietly for several minutes, apparently deep in thought. Finally, he delivers his verdict. Your machine operates through natural principles that are not yet fully understood by our philosophers, he says. This is not evidence of supernatural intervention, either divine or diabolic. However, the implications of such technology are significant. Father Reichenbach's report effectively ends the official investigation into your electrical experiments, but it also establishes your reputation as someone whose mechanical abilities exceed normal understanding. You're no longer just the clockmaker's clever son. You're the boy who built impossible machines using principles that learned men struggle to comprehend. The reputation brings both opportunities and dangers. Several wealthy Munich families commission you to design mechanical improvements for their businesses. You develop more efficient mill mechanisms, precision timing devices, and automated systems that reduce the need for human labor. These projects provide income for your family while giving you access to better materials and tools for your electrical research. But increased visibility also attracts unwanted attention from those who view rapid technological advancement as inherently destabilizing. Conservative religious leaders worry about the social effects of labor-saving devices. Traditional craftsmen fear competition from mechanized production. Government officials express concern about innovations that could provide military advantages to foreign enemies. By your 15th birthday in 1805, you've learned to navigate these competing pressures by maintaining careful secrecy about your most advanced projects. Publicly, you're known for mechanical skill and innovation within conventional boundaries. Privately, you're developing electrical technologies that won't be rediscovered for decades. Your private workshop, established in the basement beneath your father's business, becomes a laboratory for exploring the frontiers of electrical science. You've built improved galvanic cells that maintain their charge for hours rather than minutes. Your electromagnets can generate force sufficient to lift substantial weights. Most importantly, you've designed electric motors powerful enough to drive practical applications. Your first major project involves converting a small cart to electrical propulsion. The vehicle, originally designed for transporting clock parts around the workshop, becomes the testbed for developing automotive electrical systems. The motor draws power from a bank of galvanic cells mounted beneath the passenger compartment, driving the wheels through a mechanical transmission that allows speed and direction control. The electric cart's first successful operation takes place on a foggy morning in March 1806. You pilot the vehicle around your father's workshop at walking speed, demonstrating that electrical propulsion can move loads far heavier than the motor itself. The ride is smooth and nearly silent, producing only the quiet hum of electrical systems rather than the noise and smoke of steam engines. But more important than the cart's mechanical success is the psychological impact of its operation. You're not just building an interesting device or solving an abstract engineering problem. You're proving that electrical transportation is possible, that vehicles can operate without horses, steam, or any other conventional power source. You're demonstrating the future. The experience of riding in your electric cart fundamentally changes your understanding of what's achievable. If electricity can power ground transportation, it could potentially power flying machines as well. If electrical systems can control vehicle speed and direction, they could guide projectiles or spacecraft with equal precision. If electrical energy can be stored and released on demand, It could enable technologies that seem impossibly advanced by 1806 standards. Your sketches from this period show increasingly ambitious projects, flying machines powered by electric motors, driving multiple rotors or propellers, communication systems that transmit written messages across vast distances using electrical signals. Most remarkably, vessels designed for space travel, powered by electrical systems and guided by electromagnetic navigation. These designs remain purely theoretical, limited by the materials and manufacturing techniques available in early 19th century Bavaria. But they demonstrate that your mind has grasped principles that won't be formally developed until the late 1800s and early 1900s. You're thinking about aerospace engineering, telecommunications, and space exploration before these fields officially exist. Your intellectual isolation becomes increasingly difficult to bear. You're surrounded by brilliant minds, your father's mechanical expertise, the university professor's mathematical knowledge, your fellow students' quick wit, but none of them share your vision of electrical transformation. The master eats lightly, preserving his appetite for tonight's excess, while you stand behind his couch ready to refill his cup or wave away flies with a peacock feather fan whose handle is carved ivory, probably torn from an elephant that died screaming in some African savanna, so that Roman hands could hold something beautiful while they eat. Everything in this house exists because something else died. Every marble column represents a quarry worked by slaves until they dropped from exhaustion or accident, or the simple inability to continue lifting stones that weigh more than human bodies can support. Every golden ornament represents a mine where men disappeared into darkness and never emerged, their bones becoming part of the foundation that supports Roman prosperity. Every silk curtain represents worms boiled alive in distant lands. Every wooden table represents forests cleared by people who will never see the furniture their trees became. Every metal implement represents ore dug by hands that bled for Roman convenience. You are part of this machine now. Your hands contribute to its functioning. Your labor maintains its beauty. Your silence enables its operation. The knowledge sits in your stomach like spoiled meat, impossible to digest, impossible to vomit up, impossible to ignore completely. Afternoon brings new anxieties, as the evening's guests begin arriving for the customary social visits that precede formal dinners. You watch them through the slave's entrance, these titans of the known world, these men and women who speak casually of reshaping continents, who debate the fate of nations over wine and honey cakes, who treat human populations like chess pieces in games whose rules only they understand. Senator Gaius Flavius arrives first, his toga perfectly arranged, his bearing radiating the confidence of a man who has never questioned his place in the world or his right to occupy that place through the suffering of others. Behind him walks his wife, Claudia, whose jewelry could fund a small army for a full campaign season, whose casual elegance depends entirely on the invisible labor of people who mine gems and craft gold and risk their lives to acquire beauty that she wears without thinking about its cost in human terms. They embrace your master with the practiced warmth of political allies who may genuinely like each other, but whose friendship depends primarily on mutual usefulness. You've learned to read these interactions like a map of Roman power structures. The depth of the embrace indicates the current state of their alliance. The position of hands suggests who currently holds more influence. The length of eye contact reveals who needs what from whom. Tonight, Senator Flavius needs something. His embrace lasts a fraction too long, suggesting supplication rather than simple greeting. His laugh at your master's jokes rings slightly hollow, the sound of someone performing enthusiasm rather than feeling it. His wife's smile is perfectly controlled, which means she's been briefed on whatever favor her husband needs to request. Someone needs assistance, and favors in Rome are paid for in blood, gold, or human flesh. Usually all three. More guests arrive as the afternoon progresses, each arrival adding new layers of tension to political calculations that will determine the fate of provinces, peoples, and individual lives scattered across an empire that spans 3 continents. General Marcus Aurelius Brutus arrives fresh from campaigns in Britannia, his hands metaphorically stained with the blood of Celtic villages that made the mistake of believing they could remain free in a world where Rome decides who deserves freedom. Merchant Prince Lucius Crassus follows, his wealth built on ships that transport everything the empire consumes, spices and silk and slaves, and suffering in carefully measured proportions calculated to maximize profit while minimizing the transportation costs that reduce efficiency. His success depends on treating human beings like any other cargo, loading them into ship holds designed for maximum capacity rather than survival rates. Each arrival brings new layers of complexity to the political calculations occurring in this room. These are not friends gathering for simple pleasure. These are predators negotiating territory, circling each other with smiles and wine while calculating advantage and weakness, opportunity and threat. You move between them like a shadow made solid, refilling cups, removing empty plates, pretending to be deaf to conversations that could reshape the known world. They speak of new conquests as casually, as farmers discuss weather patterns. They debate the merits of enslaving versus massacring entire populations the way other men might compare different wines for their vintage qualities. The casual evil is breathtaking, not because it's dramatically wicked in the way of stories told to frighten children, but because it's so ordinarily wicked, so bureaucratically efficient, so systematically normalized that it requires no special malice or unusual cruelty to perpetuate. These aren't monsters from nightmares. They're well-educated, cultured people who happen to believe that human suffering is an acceptable price for their comfort, and who have structured their entire society around making that suffering invisible to themselves. General Brutus describes his latest campaign with the detached professionalism of a craftsman discussing technique. The Celtic children adapt quickly to slavery, he observes, tearing a piece of honey-soaked bread with fingers that have personally strangled enemy chieftains, much better than their parents, less attached to barbarian notions of freedom and dignity. Celtic children, like you once were, before Rome came to your world with fire and chains, and the systematic efficiency that makes Roman military engineering the terror of the known world. The words hit you like physical blows, each syllable a reminder of everything you've lost, everything that was taken, everything that can never be recovered. But your face remains perfectly neutral, because shadows don't react to conversation. Shadows don't feel pain or rage or the kind of helpless fury that could get you crucified in the villa's garden, where your dying screams would educate other slaves about the price of remembering they were once human. And you serve them wine with steady hands because the alternative is joining the suffering they discuss so casually, becoming another casualty in the machine that grinds human beings into profit and comfort for people who never question where their luxury comes from or what it costs in terms of lives destroyed. As afternoon slides toward evening, the villa's pace intensifies like a military operation approaching its crucial moment. The kitchen produces an endless stream of delicacies that represent months of preparation, weeks of planning, days of intensive labor by people whose names will never be mentioned when the dishes are praised. Roasted peacock stuffed with smaller birds, each species nested inside the next like deadly dolls, designed to demonstrate Roman mastery over the natural world. The preparation required 6 slaves working for 3 days, hand-feeding the peacock special grains to improve its flavor, carefully removing and preserving its feathers for reassembly after cooking, coordinating the cooking times of multiple birds so that everything emerges perfectly prepared simultaneously. Honey-glazed boar that required a hunting expedition, butchering by experts, and preparation techniques that transform wild meat into delicacies suitable for Roman palates that have been educated to appreciate subtleties that escape barbarian understanding. Fruits shipped from provinces so distant their names sound like poetry when pronounced correctly, transported at enormous expense and risk so that Roman mouths can experience flavors that exist nowhere else in the known world. Your role shifts to direct service as evening approaches, and the stakes escalate accordingly. You'll be one of 6 slaves working the triclinium tonight, a position that requires absolute precision, perfect timing, and the kind of invisible efficiency that allows Romans to enjoy their luxury without being reminded of the labor that makes it possible. No stumbling, no spilling, no visible reactions to anything you hear or see, no matter how horrific, how casual, how devastating to your understanding of human nature. Invisible efficiency is the goal. Perfect service from imperfect humans who must pretend to be something less than human to avoid being treated as something worse than human. Quintus briefs the service team with military precision. his freedman status, granting him the authority to speak with confidence, while his history as former property ensures he understands exactly what failure means for everyone under his supervision. Each slave has specific responsibilities that must be executed flawlessly, or the entire operation fails. Marcus Tertius handles wine service, pouring from amphoras that cost more than human lives, maintaining the perfect temperature and mixture ratios that distinguish civilized drinking from barbarian consumption. Livia manages the finger bowls and perfumed water for hand washing, ensuring that Roman fingers remain clean while they discuss matters that will stain their souls forever. You're assigned Syrian glass duty, the position that requires the steadiest hands, the strongest nerves, and the most complete suppression of any human reactions that might interfere with mechanical precision. The most dangerous assignment, the most valuable responsibility, the most likely to result in the kind of mistake that transforms 3 years of careful servitude into a cautionary tale for other slaves. Remember, Quintus says, his eyes moving over each face with the intensity of a general reviewing troops before battle, you are shadows tonight, shadows that pour wine and remove plates and exist only to serve Roman pleasure. Any guest who notices you individually has been failed by your service. He pauses, letting that sink in. To be noticed is to have failed. To fail is to be punished. To be punished is to serve as entertainment for people who find your suffering amusing. The Syrian glass is worth more than all your lives combined, he continues, his voice carrying the weight of absolute truth. Handle it as if your children's futures depend on it. For you, that last instruction cuts especially deep. Your child's future has already been decided by Roman swords and Roman greed and Roman efficiency in converting free people into profitable property. But you understand the message. Care for these precious objects more than you care for yourself. Value their safety above your own dignity. This is what slavery means in its purest form. The sun sets over Rome, painting the sky in shades of gold and red that remind you of autumn evenings in Gaul when you were young and free and foolish enough to believe the future belonged to you instead of to whatever empire possessed superior weapons and organization. Now the future belongs to Rome, and you belong to Rome, and the circle closes like a noose around everything you once hoped to become. The evening begins with all the grandeur Rome can muster when it wants to impress itself with its own magnificence. 23 guests recline on silk-covered couches arranged around the triclinium, according to a social hierarchy so complex and nuanced that positioning guests incorrectly could insult senators, embarrass generals, and destabilize political alliances that took years to construct. The most honored guest, General Brutus, occupies the position of honor at the host's right hand, his recent military successes in Britannia earning him the respect that Romans reserve for men who kill efficiently in service of imperial expansion. The least influential senator claims the spot furthest from the center of power, a position that marks him as someone whose political star is either rising slowly or falling rapidly. You've learned to read these seating arrangements like a map of Roman politics drawn in human flesh. Sits where tells you who matters this season, who's falling from grace this year, who's climbing toward influence through whatever combination of violence, corruption, and strategic marriages currently defines the path to power in the Eternal City. Tonight, the seating suggests major decisions are being made, military contracts worth millions of denarii, territorial appointments that will determine which provinces get stripped of their wealth most efficiently, trade agreements that will funnel the resources of entire continents into Roman coffers, or perhaps something more immediate and personal, the fate of specific peoples currently enjoying the illusion of independence. The first course arrives without incident, though without incident understates the complexity of coordinating service for 23 of Rome's most powerful citizens, while maintaining the illusion that their luxury appears effortlessly, magically, without requiring the labor of human beings who remain invisible until they make mistakes. Gustatio, the appetizer course that sets the tone for Roman excess and establishes the evening's theme of consumption without consequence. Peacock eggs sculpted into impossible shapes that demonstrate the artistic talents of slaves whose creativity is considered Roman property. Honey-soaked dormice arranged on beds of rose petals like tiny corpses decorated for burial. Olives stuffed with garum, the fermented fish sauce that Romans consider the height of sophistication, And that still makes your barbarian stomach revolt, even after 3 years of forced exposure. You move between the guests like controlled lightning, filling cups with wine so expensive it could buy freedom for a dozen slaves. If slave freedom were for sale, isn't. Which is the entire point of the system that transforms human beings into permanent property, whose value increases through their inability to purchase their own liberation. The Syrian glass feels impossibly delicate in your hands, each piece a masterwork of impossible thinness that captures light and throws it back in patterns that dance across the painted walls like trapped fragments of sky. Blue-tinted perfection that represents months of labor by artisans whose skills are legendary, whose techniques are secrets guarded more carefully than military strategies. The conversation flows as freely as the wine, and with each cup inhibitions fade like morning mist, revealing the casual cruelties that power breeds when it no longer needs to justify itself to anyone with the strength to resist. General Brutus describes his latest campaign in Britannia with the casual tone other men use to discuss the weather or the outcome of chariot races. The Celtic children adapt quickly to slavery, he says, tearing off a piece of honey-soaked bread with fingers that have personally throttled enemy chieftains who believed courage could overcome superior military organization, better than their parents, less attached to barbarian notions of freedom. Celtic children, like you once were before Rome came to your world with systematic destruction disguised as civilization. The words hit you like physical blows, each syllable a reminder of village fires, family separations, futures destroyed before they could begin. But your face remains perfectly neutral because shadows don't react to conversation, and slaves who show emotion provide entertainment that leads to consequences worse than death. Senator Flavius nods sagely, his wine-flushed face animated with the enthusiasm of someone discussing his favorite hobby. Childhood slavery produces the most reliable servants. They forget their origins completely. Very clean conversion from barbarian to Roman property. You refill his cup with wine that costs more than most free men earn in a year, your hands steady despite the rage that burns in your chest like banked coals that never quite die. They can't afford to shake. Shaking leads to spilling. Spilling leads to Syrian glass meeting marble floors. Syrian glass meeting marble floors leads to consequences that make tonight's conversation seem gentle by comparison. The second course brings greater delicacies and darker conversation, as if the consumption of elaborate foods requires equally elaborate discussions of human suffering to provide proper seasoning for Roman palates. Whole peacocks reconstructed with their feathers, the meat carved and reassembled to create the illusion of living birds frozen in eternal display. The preparation required destroying the bird to save its appearance, carefully removing every feather, cooking the meat to perfection, then reconstructing the corpse to look alive. Hours of work to create a lie that lasts minutes. The perfect metaphor for Roman civilization itself. Flamingo tongues served on beds of nightshade flowers. Delicacies that required killing hundreds of birds to harvest a single serving. Creatures that flew thousands of miles only to end their journeys as decoration on tables where men debate the fate of nations. Excess that would feed your old village for months, consumed in a single evening by people who see abundance as their natural birthright. Merchant Crassus leans forward, his wine-flushed face animated with the excitement of someone describing a particularly successful business venture. The new silver mines in Hispania are producing beyond expectations. The Iberian slaves work harder when they know their families are hostages to their productivity. Hostage families, children held against their parents' labor, parents forced to watch their children suffer as motivation for increased efficiency. The casual evil of it makes your vision blur for a moment, the Syrian glass in your hand trembling almost imperceptibly as human decency wars with survival instinct. But you catch yourself before anyone notices, forcing your attention back to the immediate task of serving wine to people who discuss human trafficking, with the same enthusiasm other people reserve for discussing their favorite foods, their preferred entertainments, their successful investments. Ingenious, Senator Maximus responds, his voice carrying the admiration of one professional appreciating another's expertise. Fear is often more effective than whips, more sustainable too. Whipped slaves break down physically. Terrorized slaves motivate themselves. The guests laugh as if he's made a clever joke, wine-amplified voices echoing off marble walls in a sound that manages to be both cultured and utterly savage. Perhaps it is a clever joke. Perhaps the suffering of millions is amusing when you're drunk on wine and power, and the absolute certainty that your comfort matters more than other people's agony. You circle the table like a planet orbiting a sun made of malice, refilling cups, removing empty plates, existing in the space between human and object that slavery creates for people who must remain functional while being treated as furniture. The Syrian glass catches the lamplight with each movement, throwing blue shadows on the walls like fragments of sky trapped in impossible delicacy. The wine is taking effect now, faces flush with color and confidence, voices rise in volume and frankness, inhibitions fade like autumn leaves, revealing the casual cruelties that flourish when power no longer needs to justify itself to anyone with the strength to object. These are Rome's best people, its most educated and sophisticated citizens. They speak multiple languages, appreciate fine art, debate philosophy with nuance and intelligence, and they discuss human trafficking with the same passion other people bring to discussions of literature, music, or athletic competitions. The Germanic tribes produce excellent gladiators, General Brutus observes, gesturing with a cup of wine that sloshes dangerously close to the rim, liquid worth more than lives threatening to stain fabric worth more than villages. Tall, strong, and stupid enough to fight with passion instead of strategy, the crowd loves them. Germanic tribes. Like Livia, standing silently in the corner with her face carefully blank as they discuss her people like livestock bred for specific purposes, their value measured entirely by their capacity to provide entertainment through their destruction. Like the cousins you'll never see again, the friends who might be dead or chained or broken in arenas across the empire, their bones buried in sand that soaks up barbarian blood for Roman pleasure. Your grip tightens slightly on the Syrian glass in your hand, the delicate vessel trembling almost imperceptibly as emotions you can't afford to feel threaten to overwhelm the careful control that keeps you alive. Blue light shimmers across its surface like trapped water, like tears made solid, like the sky you'll never see freely again. Control is everything. Control is survival. Control is the difference between serving wine and becoming entertainment for people who find your pain amusing enough to bet on, educational enough to use as object lessons, satisfying enough to justify their conviction that they deserve everything they've taken from people like you. The third course arrives with even greater fanfare, each dish a masterwork of culinary engineering that required days of preparation, dozens of specialized slaves, and ingredients shipped from the far corners of an empire that exists primarily to feed Roman appetites for things that don't exist in Rome. Whole roasted boar, its mouth stuffed with apples that were grown in distant orchards by people who will never taste them, its body cavity filled with live birds that burst free when the meat is carved, creating a spectacle that turns dinner into theater, consumption into entertainment, death into art. The symbolism isn't subtle. Life consumed by death, freedom devoured by power, beauty existing only to be destroyed for someone else's pleasure. The perfect representation of what Rome does to everything it touches. But it's during the fourth course that everything changes. You're refilling Senator Flavius's cup when it happens. The Syrian glass slips, not dramatically, not obviously, not in the way of epic disasters that announce themselves with thunder and lightning, just a tiny shift in your grip, moisture from your palm meeting the smooth surface at the wrong angle, physics asserting itself over desperate hope in the way that gravity always wins over human wishes. Time slows the way it does in nightmares, when you can see disaster approaching but lack the power to prevent it, when inevitability reveals itself with crystal clarity but offers no escape from consequences that will reshape everything that follows this moment. You watch the cup tumble from your fingers, its blue surface catching lamplight as it falls through air that seems thick as honey, dense as grief, heavy as the knowledge that your life is about to change in ways that will make the past 3 years of slavery seem like freedom by comparison. The wine traces a perfect arc through the air, dark liquid against white marble, like blood against snow, like night against day, like barbarian clumsiness against Roman perfection. Gravity pulls it downward, with the inexorable certainty of Roman law, Roman power, Roman justice about to be visited upon barbarian flesh. The sound when it hits is impossibly delicate for something so catastrophic. A musical note, pure and clear and final, crystal singing its death song as it transforms from priceless art into worthless fragments. Glass scatters across marble like blue stars, each piece catching light and throwing it back in accusations, in evidence, in proof of barbarian inferiority that will justify whatever punishment follows. Silence. Perfect, absolute silence that seems to stretch for hours but probably lasts only heartbeats. 23 pairs of Roman eyes turn toward you, with the focused attention predators give to wounded prey. Politicians give to exploitable weakness. Masters give to property that has forgotten its place in the natural order of Roman superiority. The air itself seems to freeze, as if the universe is holding its breath to see what happens when barbarian carelessness meets Roman justice, when property damages its own value, when the illusion of civilized behavior encounters the reality of power exercised without restraint. Senator Maximus sets down his own cup with careful precision, each movement deliberate and controlled, in the way of men who understand that power displayed subtly is power displayed most effectively. His face shows no emotion at all, which is somehow more terrifying than rage would be. Rage is human. Rage implies that you matter enough to provoke feeling. This is something else entirely. This is Roman law in action, swift and final, and utterly without mercy for property that fails to maintain its value, that disappoints its owner, that provides justification for the kind of discipline that serves as entertainment for guests who came expecting political theater, but will settle for the more visceral pleasure of watching barbarian flesh learn Roman lessons. "Ah," he says quietly, his voice carrying the kind of calm that precedes storms, earthquakes, eruptions that reshape landscapes. "How unfortunate." The words fall into the silence like stones into deep water, creating ripples of anticipation that spread through the room like fever through a crowded slave quarter. Around the table, guests lean forward slightly, wine forgotten as they focus on the spectacle about to unfold, the evening's entertainment shifting from political negotiation to something more primal, more satisfying, more personally involving. Not horror, entertainment. A slave's punishment is dinner theater, for people who measure their worth by others' suffering, who prove their superiority through other people's destruction, who transform human agony into personal pleasure with the casual ease that comes from never doubting their right to inflict whatever pain serves their purposes. Your mind races through possibilities like a trapped animal seeking escape from a cage that has no doors. Denial is impossible. 23 witnesses saw the cup fall from your hands, saw barbarian clumsiness destroy Roman beauty, saw property damage its own value in ways that demand correction through carefully applied pain. Excuses are worse than useless. Romans don't accept explanations from property any more than they accept advice from furniture, complaints from livestock, or political opinions from the people they've conquered. You are a tool that has malfunctioned, equipment that requires adjustment, an investment that needs correction to restore its proper value. Begging might prolong the inevitable but won't change it. Might even make it worse by providing additional entertainment for guests who appreciate the spectacle of barbarian dignity collapsing under pressure, who find amusement in watching property remember that it was once human, only to learn what that memory costs when you no longer possess the power to protect your humanity. So you do the only thing 3 years of training has taught you to do, the only response that might minimize the severity of what's coming without eliminating it entirely. You drop to your knees on the sharp fragments of Syrian glass, feeling the crystal bite through your tunic into your skin like tiny teeth designed specifically to punish barbarian flesh for Roman losses. Blood begins to seep through the fabric, dark stains spreading like guilt made visible, like evidence of barbarian inferiority written in barbarian blood on Roman marble. The pain is immediate and sharp, but it's nothing compared to what's coming. Nothing compared to what you've just bought yourself through a moment's carelessness. "Dominus," you say, your voice carefully steady, despite the knowledge that steady voices won't save you from what Roman justice requires, what Roman dignity demands, what Roman entertainment expects from situations like this. "I have failed you." It's the correct response. Acknowledgement of fault without excuse. Acceptance of whatever comes next without complaint. No explanations that might suggest you believe your perspective matters. No appeals that might imply you think your suffering should be weighed against Roman property values. Just the admission that you are property, and property that fails its function deserves whatever its owner decides. Whatever punishment serves Roman interests, whatever discipline provides appropriate entertainment for Roman guests who came expecting political theatre, but will settle for the more visceral pleasure of watching barbarian flesh learn what failure costs. Senator Maximus stands slowly, his movements deliberate and measured like a priest approaching an altar, like a general surveying a battlefield, like an artist contemplating a sculpture that requires finishing touches to achieve its intended effect. He's not angry. Anger would suggest you matter enough to provoke emotion. This is simple cause and effect, action and consequence, broken glass and broken slave. Indeed you have, he agrees, his voice carrying the weight of absolute authority, the certainty of someone who has never doubted his right to own other human beings, to use their bodies as tools, to destroy their flesh as entertainment. That cup was a gift from the governor of Syria, irreplaceable, priceless. He pauses, allowing the weight of those words to settle over the room like a shroud, like a death sentence, like the shadow of crucifixion that falls across every slave's life from the moment they become property. Irreplaceable, priceless, unlike you, unlike any slave, unlike any human being who doesn't hold citizenship in the greatest empire the world has ever known. The words hang in the air like smoke from funeral pyres, like the smell of fear that precedes public executions, like the silence that follows when someone realizes they're about to become an object lesson for other people's education and entertainment. What do you think we should do about this? He asks the room, polling dinner guests about wine selection, desert courses, or the most appropriate method for transforming barbarian flesh into Roman entertainment. The suggestions come quickly, each guest eager to contribute to the evening's theatre, to participate in the kind of creative problem-solving that turns human suffering into memorable dinner conversation. Senator Flavius recommends public crucifixion in the villa's garden, a decoration that would remind other slaves about the cost of carelessness while providing an attractive centerpiece for future entertainment. Crucifixion is traditional, he observes, swirling wine in his cup like blood in a bowl, effective, educational, and the screaming provides excellent background music for garden parties. Merchant Crassus suggests sail to the arenas, where your death might at least provide entertainment value for Roman citizens who appreciate the spectacle of barbarian blood soaking into sand while professionals kill efficiently for crowd approval. The gladiator schools always need fresh meat, he notes practically. Might recover some of the cup's value through gate receipt. General Brutus has a different idea, one that combines practical discipline with immediate entertainment for the guests assembled here tonight. Public flogging, he says thoughtfully, his military experience providing expertise in the efficient application of pain for educational purposes, severe enough to leave permanent scar. A walking reminder to other slaves about the price of failure. They discuss your torture the way other people might debate the merits of different theatrical performances, analyze the technical aspects of various artistic techniques, or compare the entertainment value of competing gladiatorial matches. Clinical analysis of which punishment would provide the best combination of deterrent effect, personal satisfaction, and memorable dinner conversation. Your agony reduced to entertainment value. Your destruction transformed into educational opportunity. Your flesh converted into canvas for Roman artistic expression, written in scars that will never fade, pain that will never fully heal, lessons that will never be forgotten by other slaves who witness what happens when barbarian carelessness damages Roman property. This is what it means to be property in its purest form, not just the labor or the lack of freedom, but this, the casual discussion of your suffering by people who see your pain as their legitimate entertainment, the reduction of your entire existence to an object lesson in Roman superiority, barbarian inferiority, and the natural order that places Roman comfort above barbarian life. Senator Maximus nods slowly, weighing the options like a judge considering evidence, though this isn't justice. Justice implies law, and law implies rights, and slaves have no rights beyond those their owners choose to grant, moment by moment, decision by decision, breath by breath. This is ownership in action, pure, uncomplicated ownership of one human being by another. The kind of absolute power that transforms people into things, subjects into objects, humans into resources that exist solely to serve other people's purposes. Public flogging, he decides, his voice carrying the finality of imperial decree, the certainty of someone who has never questioned his right to own human flesh, to destroy human dignity, to transform human suffering into personal satisfaction. 50 lashes, in the atrium where all the household slaves can witness the consequences of carelessness. 50 lashes. You've seen men die from fewer. You've seen backs open to the bone, flesh hanging in strips like butcher's meat. Infection setting in within days when wounds that deep refuse to heal in the filthy conditions where slaves are expected to recover from punishments designed to destroy rather than correct. 50 lashes isn't just punishment. It's a death sentence delivered slowly, pain by pain, stripe by stripe, lash by lash, until either your back gives out entirely or infection finishes what the whip started. A theatrical execution disguised as discipline, entertainment disguised as justice, murder disguised as necessary correction. But you don't protest because protesting would only make it worse. And worse is always possible when your property, when your pain serves other people's pleasure. When your destruction provides education that Roman law requires for the efficient management of human resources. Instead, you bow your head in acceptance, feeling glass fragments grind deeper into your knees, with movements that send fresh blood spreading across marble floors like barbarian guilt, barbarian inferiority, barbarian carelessness, made visible for Roman eyes that find satisfaction in the sight of conquered flesh, acknowledging its failure. The pain is almost welcome. Physical pain is simple compared to the psychological destruction of being reduced to an object lesson, a teaching tool, a demonstration of what happens when Roman property fails to maintain its value through perfect performance of assigned function. Gaius, Senator Maximus calls to the old Thracian slave standing silently by the wall, his scarred back a testament to 15 years of similar lessons, similar mistakes, similar demonstrations of Roman authority over barbarian flesh. Prepare the atrium. Summon all household slaves. They should see what happens when Roman property is damaged. Gaius nods and disappears to carry out orders that will orchestrate your destruction for the education of other slaves, the entertainment of Roman guests, and the satisfaction of masters who maintain their authority through carefully applied terror that keeps property focused on serving rather than remembering they were once human. You wonder if he feels pity for your situation, relief that it's you kneeling in glass and blood instead of him, or simple indifference born from 15 years of watching other slaves learn what failure costs in a system designed to extract maximum value from human resources, regardless of the human cost. Probably relief. Relief that his 15 years of perfect service have earned him safety from this particular horror, protection from the kind of mistake that transforms careful slaves into cautionary tales for other slaves who need reminding about the consequences of imperfect performance. The dinner party continues around you as if nothing significant has happened, conversation resuming about provincial taxation and military recruitment and which senators' wives are sleeping with, which generals and whether the upcoming gladiatorial games will provide sufficient entertainment for citizens who demand increasingly spectacular displays of violence to maintain their interest in public spectacle. Your upcoming torture becomes background noise to more important discussions about the price of grain, the latest fashions from Alexandria, the most efficient methods for extracting tribute from reluctant provinces, and the relative merits of enslaving versus slaughtering populations that resist Roman expansion with insufficient enthusiasm. You remain kneeling in the broken glass, blood pooling beneath your legs like evidence of barbarian inferiority, while Rome's elite continue their feast as if your destruction is just another course in the evening's entertainment, another element in the complex symphony of pleasure that defines Roman civilization at its most refined. This is how little your suffering matters to them. This is how completely you've been reduced from human being to broken object awaiting disposal. From person with thoughts and feelings and memories of freedom to property that has malfunctioned and requires correction through carefully applied pain designed to restore its value, while providing entertainment for people who find education in other people's agony. Time passes in strange, disjointed jumps as shock begins to affect your ability to process the reality of what's about to happen. The guests finish their meal, complimenting your master on the excellent wine and exceptional entertainment value of the evening's unexpected spectacle. Several make jokes about the clumsiness of barbarian slaves and the necessity of proper training techniques that prevent future incidents. General Brutus offers detailed suggestions for improved discipline methods that might reduce the likelihood of similar accidents while maximizing the educational value of punishments that serve both corrective and entertainment purposes. Fear is the best teacher, he observes sagely, but the lesson must be memorable enough to last. They're talking about you like you're not there, like you're already dead, like the walking corpse you'll become after 50 lashes reduce your back to bloody meat that may or may not heal, depending on whether infection sets in faster than Roman medicine can prevent it, which it probably will, given that slave medical care extends only as far as necessary to maintain property values rather than human dignity. Finally, Senator Maximus stands and addresses his guests with the satisfaction of a host who has provided unexpectedly memorable entertainment for people accustomed to the finest pleasures the empire can offer. Shall we adjourn to the atrium? The evening's entertainment is about to begin. Entertainment, your torture is entertainment for these people. Your screams will accompany their wine. Your blood will decorate their conversations. Your agony will provide the spice that makes their power taste sweeter, their comfort feel more complete, their superiority seem more natural and inevitable. They file out of the triclinium in pairs, laughing and chatting as if they're moving to a theatrical performance instead of a human destruction, which from their perspective they are. The difference between theater and torture disappears when the victim isn't really human in your mind, when pain becomes performance, when suffering becomes spectacle. You're hauled to your feet by two burly slaves who avoid meeting your eyes because they know that tomorrow or next week or next month they might be in your position. Solidarity is a luxury property can't afford when survival depends on not being noticed, not making mistakes, not being selected for object lessons that teach other slaves what happens when Roman property fails to maintain its value. The walk to the atrium feels like a journey across continents, each step sending fresh pain through your knees, where glass has ground deep enough to hit bone. Each movement a reminder that your body belongs to someone else who has decided to use it for purposes that will destroy, rather than preserve whatever humanity you've managed to maintain through 3 years of careful servitude. The atrium is already prepared when you arrive, transformed from a space of Roman beauty into a theater of Roman justice, where barbarian flesh will learn what failure costs when it disappoints Roman expectations. A wooden post has been erected in the center, thick enough to support a man's weight when his legs give out from pain, tall enough to display the destruction of barbarian dignity for optimal viewing by assembled slaves and entertained guests. Iron rings are bolted to the wood at shoulder height, positioned to hold a victim's arms extended, while the whip does its work with maximum efficiency and artistic effect. The positioning ensures that every lash will land exactly where intended, that every stripe will contribute to the overall pattern of destruction, that every scream will carry clearly to witnesses who need education about the consequences of disappointing Roman masters. Every slave in the household has been assembled to witness your punishment, 37 people who share your fate, but not your immediate doom. They stand in perfect silence, faces carefully blank, each one thinking the same thought. Better you than me. Thank the gods it's not me kneeling in blood and facing 50 lashes that may or may not leave enough life for recovery. Livia is there, her face pale but expressionless, as she watches someone who shared her sleeping space prepare to become a lesson in what happens when barbarian hands touch Roman treasures without sufficient care. Marcus Secundus stands with his arms crossed, his own scarred hands a testament to previous lessons in Roman justice that taught him what survival costs in a system designed to extract maximum value from human resources. Old Gaius watches with the detached interest of someone who's seen this performance too many times to count, who knows exactly what 50 lashes do to human flesh, who understands that your destruction is just another day in the machinery of Roman prosperity that grinds human beings into profit and comfort, for people who never question where their luxury comes from. The guests arrange themselves on couches that have been brought from the dining room, wine cups in hand, positioned for optimal viewing of the spectacle about to unfold. They settle in with obvious anticipation, the satisfied expressions of people who have been promised quality entertainment and expect their expectations to be met with professional competence. Senator Flavius adjusts his position for a better view of your face during the proceeding. Merchant Crassus places a small wager with General Brutus about whether you'll survive all 50 lashes or succumb before the count reaches its conclusion. They're betting on your death like it's a chariot race, gladiatorial match, or any other sporting event where the outcome provides excitement and the possibility of profitable prediction. They're gambling on how much pain you can endure before your body gives out entirely, making entertainment from your suffering, finding pleasure in your destruction. The flogging post stands before you like an altar dedicated to Roman superiority over barbarian flesh, a monument to the natural order that places Roman comfort above barbarian life, Roman pleasure above barbarian dignity, Roman entertainment above barbarian survival. This is where barbarian pride comes to die, where captured warriors learn the true meaning of submission, where human dignity is stripped away one lash at a time until nothing remains but obedience born from terror, compliance bought with blood, submission purchased through the systematic destruction of everything that once made you human. Your tunic is removed with efficient brutality, pulled over your head and discarded like the worthless rag it's always been, leaving your torso exposed to evening air that raises goosebumps across skin that will soon be valleys of torn flesh instead of unmarked surface. 37 pairs of slave eyes examine your back with clinical attention, memorizing what unmarked flesh looks like before it becomes a lesson in Roman discipline, a map of barbarian failure, a canvas for the kind of art that Romans create with leather and metal studs on human skin. The iron rings are cold against your wrists as they're bound with rope so rough it immediately begins abrading skin already weakened by 3 years of labor that leaves hands cracked and bleeding most days. Your arms are pulled taut, stretching your spine until every vertebra stands out like a mountain range beneath skin that will soon be transformed into something that no longer qualifies as human anatomy. The position is designed for maximum exposure, maximum vulnerability, maximum display of Roman power over barbarian flesh that dared to disappoint Roman expectations. Your back becomes a stage where Roman authority will perform for the entertainment of Roman citizens and the education of Roman property. Behind you, someone tests the whip with experimental snaps that crack through the air, like breaking bones, like splitting wood, like the sound freedom makes when it dies completely. The noise makes several slaves flinch involuntarily, despite their efforts to remain perfectly controlled. They've all heard that sound before, either as victim or witness. They know exactly what it means. They know exactly what's coming. The whip itself is a masterwork of functional design, crafted specifically for the efficient application of maximum pain with minimal effort by the wielder. Leather strips reinforced with metal studs, weighted for optimal impact. Designed to open flesh cleanly while avoiding damage to internal organs that might cause immediate death before the lesson is complete. This isn't random violence. This is engineered suffering. Roman technology applied to the problem of transforming human beings into more compliant versions of themselves through carefully calibrated destruction that stops just short of permanent incapacitation. Senator Maximus positions himself beside the flogging post, close enough to appreciate every detail of what he's ordered, but far enough away to avoid blood splatter that might stain his toe. This isn't delegated violence. This is personal attention to the destruction of property that has disappointed him, entertainment that he wants to savor completely. He wants to see your face when the leather bites into flesh. He wants to watch Roman law written in blood across barbarian skin. He wants to observe the exact moment when barbarian pride transforms into barbarian submission, when human dignity collapses under the weight of Roman superiority demonstrated through superior capacity for inflicting suffering. "Begin," he says simply, the word falling into silence like a stone into deep water, creating ripples of anticipation that spread through assembled witnesses who understand they're about to receive education in what happens when Roman property fails to maintain its value through perfect performance. The first lash catches you unprepared despite knowing it's coming. Despite 3 years of watching other slaves learn similar lessons, despite understanding exactly what 50 lashes means in terms of immediate agony and long-term consequences. The leather strikes between your shoulder blades with the force of a sword blow, fire spreading across your back like spilled oil that's been set ablaze by Roman authority. The sound is different when it's your flesh being opened, your skin being torn, your blood being spilled for Roman entertainment. Wet, meaty, organic in a way that turns your stomach and makes your vision blur with shock that your body hasn't yet learned to process. This is what you sound like when you're being destroyed. This is what human meat sounds like when it's being tenderized for Roman pleasure. You bite down on your tongue hard enough to draw blood, determined not to give them the satisfaction of immediate screams, desperate to maintain some fragment of dignity, even as Roman justice systematically strips away everything that once made you human. Romans respect strength even in slaves, especially in slaves. Show weakness too quickly and the punishment becomes worse, much worse. But dignity is a luxury you can't afford when your back is being opened by Roman efficiency. The second lash crosses the first, creating an X of torn flesh that immediately begins weeping blood down your spine, like barbarian tears made visible, like evidence of barbarian inferiority written in barbarian blood for Roman education. This one forces a grunt from your lips despite your determination to remain silent. Pain like this doesn't ask permission. It takes control of your voice, your breathing, your entire nervous system, with the authority of Roman law applied directly to barbarian flesh that has forgotten its place in the natural order. "One," calls the slave, wielding the whip, his voice carefully neutral as if he's counting inventory instead of human destruction, as if he's measuring grain instead of agony, as if he's recording profit instead of the systematic dismantling of another human being's capacity to remain whole. Professional detachment is how slaves survive tasks like this. Emotion would make the job impossible. Humanity would make the assignment unbearable. Conscience would make participation in another person's destruction psychologically devastating. Better to become a tool in the hands of Roman authority than to remain human enough to feel guilt about what you're being forced to do. The third lash opens new territory across your shoulder blades, and this time you can't prevent the gasp that escapes despite every effort to maintain control over your own voice, your own reactions, your own capacity to choose how you respond to what's being done to your flesh by Roman justice. The guests lean forward slightly, wine forgotten as they focus on your reaction, with the intensity of art critics evaluating a performance, theater enthusiasts judging the quality of acting, or scientists observing an experiment designed to test the limits of human endurance when subjected to carefully applied pain. Your agony becomes their entertainment. Your destruction becomes their pleasure. Your suffering becomes their proof that Roman civilization represents the pinnacle of human achievement, because it can transform barbarian flesh into Roman lessons with such artistic efficiency. 2. The count continues with mechanical precision. Number 4 lands lower, across your ribs where the leather can reach organs that produce different sounds when they're damaged, different sensations when they're torn, different educational value for witnesses who need to understand that Roman property extends all the way through barbarian bodies to the core of whatever makes barbarians think they deserve better treatment than livestock. The scream tears itself from your throat without permission, a sound so raw and animal that it echoes off the atrium's marble walls like the cry of something that has forgotten it was ever human, something that exists only to demonstrate Roman superiority through its capacity to suffer for Roman pleasure. Senator Flavius raises his wine cup in a small toast, his face flushed with wine and satisfaction. "Excellent projection," he comments with the appreciation of someone evaluating a musical performance. "These Gauls have impressive lung capacity, very expressive. They're reviewing your screams like music critics evaluating a singer's technique, rating the quality of your agony like wine tasters comparing vintages, discussing the aesthetic merits of your suffering like art collectors debating the relative value of different sculptures. Your torture has been reduced to entertainment that can be critiqued, improved and compared to previous performances by other slaves who learned similar lessons under similar circumstances for the education of similar audiences who find pleasure in the systematic destruction of human dignity." 3. The slave continues, counting with the mechanical precision of someone who has learned to divorce his humanity from his actions, his conscience from his survival, his soul from the requirements of staying alive in a system that uses human beings as tools for destroying other human beings. The 5th lash catches you diagonally across the previous wounds, and something deeper than skin tears, with a sound like fabric ripping, like wood splitting, like the noise human flesh makes when Roman efficiency encounters barbarian anatomy, with sufficient force to separate what was never meant to be separate. The pain transcends physical sensation and becomes something else entirely. Pure experience, raw existence distilled to its most basic element, suffering without purpose or meaning or end. Your entire universe contracts to the space between your shoulder blades, where Roman authority is writing lessons in barbarian blood for the education of witnesses who need reminding about what happens when property disappoints its own. You lose count somewhere around the 10th lash, because numbers become meaningless, when your entire reality consists of waiting for the next impact, feeling leather and metal studs open new channels in flesh that was never designed to withstand this kind of systematic destruction, hearing the wet sounds of your own dismantling, punctuated by cultured voices discussing dinner plans for next week. Blood runs down your legs now, pooling at your feet in dark red puddles that reflect lamplight like liquid garnets, like melted rubies, like evidence of barbarian inferiority made visible for Roman eyes that find satisfaction in the sight of conquered flesh, acknowledging its failures through involuntary bleeding. The marble floor beneath you is being decorated with barbarian pain, a pattern that will be scrubbed away by other slaves, before mourning leaves any permanent record of your suffering except the scars you'll carry until you die from infection, exhaustion, or the simple inability to continue functioning as human property in a system designed to extract maximum value from human resources. If you survive, which becomes less likely with each lash that opens new damage in flesh that was already struggling to repair itself from previous lessons in Roman discipline, previous mistakes that earned previous punishments, previous failures that taught you what Roman justice costs in terms of human suffering. Around lash 20, your legs begin to give out entirely, muscles no longer capable of supporting weight that seems to increase with each impact, each stripe, each moment of agony that teaches you what barbarian flesh is worth when it disappoints Roman expectations. The iron rings and rope around your wrists become the only things holding you upright as your body tries to escape pain that has nowhere to go except deeper into flesh that belongs to someone else. Your weight pulls against the bonds, making your shoulders scream in harmony with your destroyed back, creating a symphony of agony that provides musical accompaniment for Roman conversations about provincial taxation rates, military recruitment strategies, and the most efficient methods for extracting tribute from reluctant populations. The guests are enjoying themselves immensely, wine and entertainment combining to create the kind of sophisticated pleasure that defines Roman civilization at its most refined. Merchant Crassus has moved to a position where he can see your face as well as your back, taking aesthetic pleasure in the interplay between anticipation and impact, the artistic relationship between expectation and reality when Roman efficiency meets barbarian flesh. General Brutus provides commentary on the flogger's technique with the expertise of someone who has personally supervised hundreds of similar educational sessions designed to teach barbarian property what Roman authority means in practical terms. Aim lower, he advises with professional interest. The kidney area produces particularly satisfying reactions, more educational value. They're coaching your torture like gladiator trainers coaching a fighter, optimizing your agony for maximum entertainment value, treating your suffering as a performance that can be improved through professional consultation and technical expertise, optimizing human destruction as if it's an art form that can be perfected through practice and professional development. Your agony becomes their creative expression. Your flesh becomes their canvas. Your screams become their music in a performance designed to demonstrate Roman superiority through Roman capacity for inflicting suffering with artistic efficiency. Somewhere around lash 30, you stop being entirely human and become something else. A thing that bleeds and screams and exists only to demonstrate Roman power over barbarian flesh, Roman authority over barbarian dignity, Roman entertainment value extracted from barbarian suffering that serves no purpose except proving that Romans can destroy barbarian bodies whenever they choose. The psychological destruction is almost worse than the physical annihilation of your back. Almost. The knowledge that you've been reduced from human being to teaching tool, from person to property, from individual to object lesson, in what happens when barbarian hands touch Roman treasures without sufficient care or adequate reverence. Your vision blurs with tears and shock and blood loss that's beginning to affect your brain's ability to process reality in any coherent way. The atrium becomes a kaleidoscope of marble and lamplight, and Roman faces twisted with pleasure at the sight of your destruction, your reduction, your transformation from whatever you once were into whatever they've decided you should become. This is what Romans call justice. This is what they mean by law and order. This is how they maintain the civilization they're so proud of, through the systematic destruction of anyone who dares to break anything they value, even accidentally, even without malice, even when the breaking costs nothing but pride and the replacement costs nothing but money. But pride and money matter more than barbarian flesh, when barbarian flesh belongs to Romans who can afford to destroy it for entertainment, education, and the simple pleasure of exercising absolute power over people who can't resist, can't escape, can't do anything except bleed quietly and efficiently for Roman pleasure. Lash 40 opens something vital in your back, and you feel warmth that isn't blood spreading down your spine, with the sick heat of internal damage, serious internal damage, the kind that kills slowly over days or weeks when infection eats through flesh until you die in agony that makes tonight seem gentle by comparison. But you're still conscious, still breathing, still bleeding entertainment onto marble floors for the pleasure of people who see your agony as their natural right, their legitimate entertainment, their proof that Roman civilization represents the pinnacle of human achievement because it can transform barbarian suffering into Roman pleasure with such artistic efficiency. 23 Roman citizens sipping wine, while a barbarian slave learns the true meaning of Roman superiority through the systematic destruction of barbarian flesh that dared to disappoint Roman expectations by dropping Roman treasures onto Roman floors, where they break into Roman fragments that cost Roman money to replace. The 45th lash nearly sends you into unconsciousness, but consciousness is what they want from this performance. Unconscious slaves don't scream properly, don't provide the reactions that make torture entertaining, don't demonstrate the kind of awareness that makes their suffering educational for other slaves who need reminding about what happens when Roman property fails to maintain its value. Someone throws water on your face to keep you awake enough to appreciate the final strokes, to remain aware enough to learn what the lesson is supposed to teach, to stay conscious enough to provide entertainment value for Roman guests who deserve quality spectacle in exchange for their political support. Cold water mixing with blood and sweat and tears on skin that no longer qualifies as intact human anatomy. Water that brings you back to awareness just in time to feel the next lash open new damage in flesh that was already destroyed beyond any hope of complete recovery. 46, 47, 48. Each number called out like milestones on a journey from human being to broken object, from person to property, from individual to object lesson in what happens when barbarian carelessness meets Roman justice administered with Roman efficiency for Roman entertainment. Each impact a lesson in what you're worth when you're property, how much you matter when you belong to someone else, what happens when you forget that your body exists to serve Roman purposes rather than your own. Each scream a note in the symphony of Roman justice played on barbarian flesh for the education of barbarian slaves, and the entertainment of Roman citizens who find pleasure in the systematic destruction of human dignity through carefully applied pain. 49. The anticipation of the final lash is almost worse than the previous 48. Your entire body tensing in preparation for impact that will complete your transformation from slave to object lesson, from property to cautionary tale, from human being to whatever you become when Roman justice finishes teaching barbarian flesh what failure costs. The guests lean forward with obvious anticipation, not wanting to miss the climactic moment of the evening's entertainment, the final note in the symphony of suffering that proves Roman superiority through Roman capacity for destroying barbarian bodies with artistic precision. Wine cups raised like they're toasting your destruction, faces flushed with pleasure at the spectacle of barbarian flesh learning Roman lessons, eyes bright with satisfaction at the demonstration of Roman power over barbarian life, Roman authority over barbarian dignity, Roman entertainment extracted from barbarian suffering. 50. The final lash lands across wounds that have already been opened and reopened, across flesh that's more blood than skin, across a back that will never be the same, regardless of whether you survive long enough for infection to kill you slowly or blood loss to kill you quickly. The scream that tears from your throat is barely human anymore. Pure animal sound. The noise a dying thing makes when death takes too long to arrive, when suffering extends beyond the limits of human endurance into territories where consciousness becomes a curse rather than a gift. Raw, primal sound that echoes off marble walls, like the death cry of everything you once were, everything you once hoped to become, everything that dies when human beings are reduced to property, and property is destroyed for entertainment. Then, silence. Perfect, absolute silence broken only by the sound of blood dripping onto marble, with the steady rhythm of a clock, counting down whatever time you have left, and your ragged breathing as you hang from iron rings like meat in a butcher shop, like a carcass prepared for Roman consumption, like evidence that barbarian flesh exists primarily to serve Roman pleasure, regardless of what that service costs in human terms. The entertainment is over. The lesson has been delivered. Roman justice has been satisfied through the systematic destruction of barbarian dignity, barbarian flesh, barbarian humanity reduced to object lesson for the education of other slaves and the entertainment of Roman guests who came expecting political theatre but received something more visceral, more personal, more satisfying. Senator Maximus approaches the post where you hang, examining his handiwork with the critical eye of an artist, evaluating a completed sculpture, a craftsman assessing finished work, a master reviewing the results of discipline applied to property that disappointed Roman expectations. Blood covers your back from shoulders to kidneys, some wounds so deep they'll never heal properly, even if you survive long enough for healing to begin. Permanent disfigurement, permanent disability, permanent reminder of what happens when slaves disappoint their masters, when property fails to maintain its value, when barbarian carelessness meets Roman justice. "Well done," he tells the slave who wielded the whip, praising technique the way other men might compliment a cook's preparation of dinner, an artist's completion of a painting, or a craftsman's construction of furniture. Clean technique, excellent distribution, very educational. He's critiquing your torture like it's a craft that can be perfected through practice and professional development, an art form that can be improved through technical expertise and creative innovation. Your agony reduced to technical achievement, worthy of praise and professional advancement. Performance art created with your flesh as canvas, your screams as music, your blood as paint in a masterpiece that demonstrates Roman superiority through Roman capacity for destroying barbarian bodies with artistic efficiency and educational value. The guests begin filing out, their evening's entertainment complete, satisfaction evident on faces flushed with wine and pleasure at the spectacle they've witnessed. They chat about other dinner parties they've attended, other slaves they've seen punished, other spectacles they're planning to attend in the continuing search for entertainment that proves their superiority through other people's suffering. Your destruction becomes just another pleasant memory in lives filled with casual cruelties and comfortable certainties about their natural right to own other human beings, to destroy other people's bodies, to extract entertainment from other people's agony whenever Roman property fails to maintain its value through perfect performance. Senator Flavius pauses beside your hanging form, wine making him philosophical about the evening's lessons. "Barbarians," he observes to his wife with the satisfaction of someone whose prejudices have been confirmed through practical demonstration. They never learn to value what civilized people treasure. No respect for Roman achievement. His wife nods agreement, her jewelry catching lamplight as she moves. Perhaps this one will be more careful with the remaining glassware, assuming it survives long enough to learn proper respect for Roman property. They discuss your future behavior like you're not there, like you're already dead. Like the barely breathing thing hanging from iron rings isn't quite human enough to deserve acknowledgement as a thinking, feeling, being capable of understanding their words, their contempt, their casual dismissal of your suffering as necessary correction. Your pain has become their proof of their superiority. Your destruction has become their evidence that Roman civilization represents the pinnacle of human achievement. Your screams have become their music, your blood their paint, Your broken flesh their canvas for artistic expression that celebrates Roman power through barbarian suffering. Then they're gone, disappeared into the Roman night to continue their Roman lives filled with Roman certainties about Roman superiority over barbarian scum who exist primarily to serve Roman purposes, to provide Roman entertainment, to demonstrate Roman authority through their capacity to suffer for Roman pleasure. The atrium empties until only slaves remain. 37 people who share your fate, but not your immediate devastation. 37 witnesses to what happens when Roman property disappoints Roman expectations. 37 students who have received education in what failure costs when you belong to someone else entirely. They cut you down without ceremony, letting you collapse onto marble stained with your own blood, like evidence of barbarian inferiority, like proof that Roman justice works exactly as intended, like demonstration that slaves who fail their function receive correction that serves both educational and entertainment purposes. Your legs won't support your weight. Your back feels like it's been stripped to the bone and beyond, flesh hanging in ribbons that may or may not reattach, depending on whether Roman medicine extends to property that has already served its primary purpose as object lesson. Consciousness keeps trying to slip away, but pain prevents the mercy of unconsciousness, the blessing of escape from awareness of what you've become. Gaius approaches with a bucket of salt water, his face carefully neutral, as he prepares to administer what passes for medical care when Roman property requires maintenance that might restore its capacity for future service. Not medicine, not treatment, just salt water to clean wounds and prevent immediate infection that might kill you before you can return to useful labor. Can't have valuable property dying from sepsis when there's still work to be extracted from broken flesh, still service to be demanded from destroyed dignity, still labor to be squeezed from whatever humanity remains after Roman justice finishes teaching barbarian flesh what failure costs. The salt water hits your opened back like liquid fire, like molten metal poured directly onto exposed nerves, like the concentrated essence of every star in the sky focused into pain that transcends physical sensation and becomes pure experience of what suffering means when it's inflicted by people who find your agony entertaining. The scream that erupts from your throat echoes off marble walls like the cry of a damned soul, discovering what eternal torment actually means, like the sound human dignity makes when it dies completely, like the noise freedom makes when it's beaten out of barbarian flesh by Roman efficiency, applied with Roman precision for Roman entertainment. Every wound burns like individual suns, salt penetrating to places that should never see such chemical fire, such systematic destruction, such carefully engineered agony designed to clean while torturing, to heal while punishing, to maintain while destroying. But it does prevent infection, probably, maybe. If you're lucky, and the gods of your dead people still remember your name and decide that survival is preferable to the mercy of death, that continued service is better than the peace of ending, that living as broken property serves some purpose that justifies the pain of remaining conscious in a body that no longer qualifies as intact human anatomy. Other slaves help you to your feet with careful hands that avoid the worst damage, while providing just enough support to get you moving toward whatever passes for recovery when Roman property requires repair. Their faces remain carefully neutral because showing emotion would be dangerous, because sympathy might be interpreted as criticism of Roman justice, because caring about other slaves' suffering implies that slave suffering matters enough to deserve emotional investment. Tomorrow they'll return to their duties as if nothing happened. Tomorrow you'll be expected to do the same, assuming you can walk, assuming you can lift your arms, assuming you can function as anything more than a scarred reminder of what happens when Roman property gets damaged through barbarian carelessness, assuming you survive the night, which remains an open question. When wounds this deep meet, conditions this unsanitary in bodies already weakened by 3 years of subsistence rations and systematic overwork that leaves no reserves for fighting infection, healing damage, or maintaining the will to continue existing as property, in a system designed to extract maximum value from human resources. The walk back to the slave quarters feels like a journey across continents, when every step sends fire up your spine, every movement opens wounds that have barely begun to clot, every breath reminds you that breathing hurts when your back has been turned into hamburger by Roman efficiency applied to barbarian flesh. Blood seeps through the rough bandages they've wrapped around your torso. Dark stains spreading like accusations against your ability to heal. Evidence that barbarian flesh may not be strong enough to recover from Roman lessons. Proof that some damage goes too deep for simple survival to overcome. The sleeping platform feels like paradise compared to hanging from iron rings. But paradise is relative when your back is hamburger and your future consists of waking up tomorrow to serve the same people who orchestrated your destruction tonight. Assuming you wake up at all, assuming infection doesn't set in faster than your body can fight it, assuming you retain enough functionality to be worth keeping alive. Other slaves avoid looking at you directly as you attempt to find a position that doesn't tear wounds open further. Not from disgust or fear, but from recognition that you are their future, their inevitable destination, the mathematical certainty that awaits anyone who serves Roman masters long enough to make a mistake that costs more than Roman masters are willing to forgive. Sleep, when it finally comes through exhaustion that overcomes even pain this intense, is filled with dreams of home and freedom, and people who saw you as human rather than property, who valued your dignity rather than your labor, who mourned when you disappeared rather than calculating replacement costs for damaged goods. You wake to discover that dreams lie, that freedom was always an illusion, that the people who saw you as human are probably dead or enslaved, or broken by the same Roman efficiency that just taught you what barbarian flesh is worth when it disappoints Roman expectations. Morning brings no mercy, only the harsh reality of survival in a world where your destroyed flesh must still perform its designated functions because Roman property doesn't get sick leave, doesn't receive workers' compensation, doesn't qualify for medical retirement when industrial accidents leave permanent damage. The rough wool blanket has stuck to your wounds during the night, dried blood acting like glue to bond fabric, to flesh in ways that make movement a choice between staying still and tearing yourself open again. Removing it tears several partially healed cuts back to bleeding, fresh red against the brown crust of last night's destruction. Your first attempt to sit up fails completely, sending lightning through your spine, as muscles that haven't been severed entirely spasm in protest against a movement they're no longer capable of supporting. The pain is different now, deeper, more complex, more systematic than the sharp agony of fresh wounds. Not the immediate fire of leather meeting flesh, but the grinding ache of damaged tissue trying to repair itself without proper care, adequate rest, or the kind of medical attention that Romans reserve for people rather than property, citizens rather than slaves, humans rather than tools that need maintenance. Around you, the other slaves are already stirring because life in the villa doesn't pause for individual suffering, doesn't accommodate personal disasters, doesn't recognize that last night's entertainment might have created this morning's inability to function according to Roman expectations. 22 other people need to maintain their own survival, which means appearing useful and productive regardless of what happened to their fellow property last night, regardless of whether they feel sympathy for your situation, regardless of whether they understand that witnessing your destruction was education in their own inevitable future. Gaius approaches with more salt water and clean rags, his face showing no emotion as he begins the process of cleaning wounds that have reopened during the night. This isn't kindness. This isn't medical care. This is maintenance, keeping valuable property functional enough to perform its designated tasks while minimizing the investment required to restore damaged goods to working condition. You'll work today, he tells you quietly, his voice carrying the flat authority of someone who understands that survival depends on meeting Roman expectations regardless of physical condition, emotional state, or capacity for actual performance. Light duties, kitchen preparation only. No serving until the wounds close. Light duties. Kitchen preparation only. No serving until the scars become acceptable for display in front of guests who prefer their entertainment to come with aesthetic appeal rather than visible reminders of what their pleasure costs in human terms. Romans don't mind owning damaged property, but they prefer their comfort to be served by slaves who don't obviously demonstrate the consequences of Roman justice. Better to keep the destruction hidden until it heals into scars that can be ignored, dismissed, or appreciated as evidence of proper discipline rather than recent brutality. The walk to the kitchen is agony performed in slow motion, each step a careful negotiation between the need to move and the impossibility of movement without pain that threatens to overwhelm consciousness entirely. Every movement sends lightning through your destroyed back. Lifting anything heavier than a spoon becomes an exercise in controlled screaming. Reaching for ingredients threatens to tear wounds that have barely begun the healing process. But you work because the alternative is death. Not quick death. Not merciful death. Slow death. The kind that comes when property becomes more expensive to maintain than to replace. When the cost of feeding damaged goods exceeds their productive value. When Roman efficiency calculates that disposal provides better return on investment than repair. Roman mathematics doesn't tolerate broken tools that can't perform their functions, damaged equipment that requires more resources than it produces, human property that consumes food without generating adequate labor to justify the expense of keeping it alive. Quintus watches you with calculating eyes, measuring your usefulness against your cost, like an accountant evaluating investments, a merchant assessing inventory, a manager determining whether repair or replacement provides better value. A slave who can't work is a slave who consumes resources without producing value. And in Rome's economic equations, that mathematics leads inevitably to sale, abandonment, or execution. The Syrian glass order has been doubled, he tells you without inflection, his voice carrying information that transforms last night's entertainment into this morning's economic consequences. The master wants replacement pieces from the same craftsman. Your clumsiness will cost the household 2 months' profit from the Gallic grain imports. 2 months' profit. Your single moment of human weakness, your brief failure to maintain perfect control over delicate objects worth more than human lives, will require hundreds of other slaves to work longer, harder, under worse conditions, to compensate for Syrian glass that exists only to demonstrate Roman superiority over barbarian inferiority. This is how the machine works with elegant efficiency. Your individual destruction ripples outward like stones thrown into still water, affecting other slaves, other properties, other people who will suffer because you failed to maintain perfect control, because you allowed human mortality to interfere with Roman expectation, because you forgot that barbarian flesh exists primarily to serve Roman purposes, regardless of the cost in human terms. Other slaves in Gaul will work extra hours in grain fields to generate the profit needed to replace glass broken by barbarian carelessness. Slaves in mines will dig deeper, faster, with less food and more beatings to extract silver needed to pay Syrian craftsmen for replacement treasures. Slaves in ships will endure worse conditions during transport of goods needed to fund purchases that wouldn't be necessary if barbarian hands had been more careful with Roman property. Your mistake becomes their punishment. Your failure becomes their increased suffering. Your moment of human weakness becomes their extended exploitation in the service of Roman luxury that depends entirely on the systematic extraction of value from people who can't resist, can't escape, can't do anything except work harder to compensate for disruptions in the flow of profit that funds Roman civilization. The day crawls forward with mechanical precision, despite your body's inability to function according to its normal capacity. You peel vegetables while your back seeps blood through rough bandages that stick to wounds and tear when you move. You scrub pots while cuts reopen with each motion that requires lifting, reaching, or any action more complex than standing perfectly still. You continue functioning because functioning is the only choice property has when property belongs to people who measure its value entirely through its capacity to work, regardless of condition, regardless of pain, regardless of whether the work causes additional damage that compounds the original injury. Other slaves avoid looking at you directly as you struggle through tasks that were routine yesterday but have become mountainous challenges today. Not from disgust or fear, but from recognition that you represent their future, their inevitable destination, the mathematical certainty that awaits anyone who serves Roman masters long enough to make a mistake that costs Roman money. Better not to see too clearly what awaits them all, better not to acknowledge too directly that last night's entertainment was education in what happens when Roman property fails to maintain its value through perfect performance. Better not to think too hard about when their own moment will come, when their own carelessness will provide similar entertainment for Roman guests who find pleasure in barbarian suffering. Lunch preparation requires lifting heavy pots, and the first time you try, something vital tears in your back with a sensation like fabric ripping, like wood splitting, like the sound flesh makes when Roman efficiency meets barbarian anatomy with sufficient force to cause permanent damage. The pain is so intense that vision grays at the edges and consciousness threatens to slip away entirely. But you grip the kitchen table with hands that shake from effort rather than fear, and force yourself to remain upright, to continue working, to meet Roman expectations regardless of whether your body can support the performance those expectations require. Because stopping would be noticed. Notice leads to evaluation. Evaluation leads to calculations about whether repair costs exceed replacement costs, and those calculations lead to disposal through sale to mines, arenas, or the kind of brothels that service docks where foreign sailors pay Roman prices for Roman entertainment provided by barbarian flesh that has outlived its usefulness in more refined setting. The afternoon brings a visitor to the kitchen. Senator Maximus himself come to inspect the property he damaged last night, to evaluate whether his investment in discipline has produced appropriate returns in terms of improved performance and proper attitude adjustment. He examines you with the same clinical attention he might give to a horse with an injured leg, calculating remaining usefulness against replacement costs like a merchant evaluating damaged goods, a craftsman assessing broken tools, an owner determining whether repair or disposal provides better value. "How much work can it perform?" he asks Quintus, discussing your capacity like you're a broken machine instead of a human being listening to every word, instead of a person whose future is being decided through conversation that treats your life as an accounting problem with various possible solutions. "Light duties for now," Quintus replies with professional assessment. "Full capacity should return within a month, assuming the wounds heal cleanly and infection doesn't set in to complicate recovery. And if they don't, sale to the mines would recover 60% of replacement cost. The arenas might pay more if it survives long enough to provide entertainment value through combat rather than simple labor. 60% of replacement cost. That's your value as a human being reduced to pure mathematics. Not your history, your skills, your memories of freedom, your dreams of seeing home again. Not your capacity for thought, feeling, or any of the qualities that once made you believe you possessed inherent dignity that couldn't be bought or sold. Just 60% of what it would cost to buy another barbarian body to replace your broken one. Damaged goods marked down for quick sale to buyers who don't require premium quality, who can make use of defective property that still retains some productive capacity despite obvious flaw. Senator Maximus nods with satisfaction and departs, his inspection complete, his property evaluated, his investment in discipline confirmed as sound business practice that maintains order while providing entertainment value for guests who appreciate quality spectacle. You are inventory now. Damaged inventory, but inventory nonetheless, and inventory exists to be managed efficiently for maximum return on investment, regardless of whether the inventory can think, feel, or remember what it was like to be treated as something more than a resource to be exploited until it breaks completely. Your suffering has been reduced to an accounting problem solved through careful resource management that weighs the cost of maintenance against the benefit of continued service and makes decisions based purely on mathematical calculations that treat human pain as irrelevant variable in equations designed to maximize profit. Evening brings the return of normal villa routine. The master dines, entertains guests, discusses politics and philosophy and the latest news from provinces where Roman legions are busy creating new slaves to replace the ones who die from overwork, abuse, or the simple inability to continue functioning as human tools in a machine designed to extract maximum value from conquered peoples. Tonight, the guests include several senators who weren't present for last night's entertainment, but who hear the story with obvious appreciation for the educational value of proper discipline applied to property that disappoints Roman expectations. They nod sagely at descriptions of your punishment, offer suggestions for improved technique next time, and express satisfaction that Roman justice continues to function with appropriate efficiency. Your destruction becomes dinner conversation, a pleasant anecdote that demonstrates the host's proper management of his household, his commitment to maintaining discipline among his property, his understanding that Roman civilization depends on Roman authority being exercised with sufficient firmness to keep barbarian property properly motivated. But tonight, as you lie on your sleeping platform trying to find a position that doesn't tear wounds open again, trying to process the reality of what your life has become, trying to understand how you survived the transition from human being to broken object awaiting disposal. You think about numbers that matter more than accounting calculation. 60 million slaves in the empire. 60 million human beings reduced to property, to tools, to objects that exist only to serve other people's comfort, other people's pleasure, other people's conviction that their superiority justifies whatever suffering they inflict on people, too weak to resist, too powerless to escape, too broken to fight back effectively. You are one of 60 million. Your destroyed back is one of millions destroyed by Roman whips, Roman efficiency, Roman entertainment that transforms human suffering into Roman pleasure with systematic precision that would be admirable if it weren't devoted to purposes that reduce human beings to resources for consumption. Your lost freedom is one of millions stolen by Roman swords, Roman organization, Roman conviction that strength creates its own moral authority and gives the strong the right to own the weak without limit, restraint, or consideration for anything except their own comfort and convenience. Your suffering is not unique, it's not special, it's not even particularly notable in the context of an empire built on the systematic exploitation of conquered peoples, who made the mistake of believing they could remain free in a world where Rome decides who deserves freedom based entirely on their capacity to prevent Rome from taking it away. You are a single drop in an ocean of barbarian blood that waters the garden of Roman civilization, feeds the roots of Roman prosperity, and provides the foundation for Roman achievements that depend entirely on Roman capacity to transform other people's labor into Roman luxury, through the simple expedient of owning the people who do the work. In your old life, before the legions came with fire and chains and the systematic destruction of everything you thought you understood about how the world should work, you believed in justice. You believed that good behavior led to good results, that hard work earned respect, that human beings possessed inherent dignity that couldn't be taken away by force. You believed that the universe operated according to principles that made moral sense, that rewarded virtue and punished vice, that provided some mechanism for ensuring that suffering served purposes greater than the convenience of people strong enough to inflict it on people too weak to prevent it. Those beliefs died harder than your body is dying now. Physical pain is simple compared to the psychological destruction of learning that the universe doesn't care about fairness, that power creates its own morality, that human dignity exists only when backed by strength sufficient to defend it against people who see dignity as weakness to be exploited rather than virtue to be respected. The Romans didn't just conquer your body when they dragged you from the ruins of your village to the slave markets of Rome. They conquered your understanding of how the world works, your faith in justice, your conviction that human life possesses meaning beyond its utility to people with superior weapons and organization. They replaced your barbarian notions of honor and justice with the brutal clarity of ownership and submission, the mathematical precision of profit and loss, the elegant simplicity of a system where human value is determined entirely by human usefulness to people who own humans rather than being owned by them. They taught you that dignity is a luxury only free people can afford, that justice is a concept only powerful people can enforce, that morality is a privilege that belongs exclusively to people with sufficient strength to make their moral preferences into other people's legal obligations. But lying here in the dark, surrounded by other stolen people trying to survive another day of beautiful slavery, trying to heal from wounds that may never close completely, trying to understand what survival means when survival requires abandoning everything that once made you believe life was worth living, you realize something the Romans don't want you to understand, something they need you not to understand if their system is going to continue functioning with the efficiency that makes Roman civilization possible. They need you to believe in their superiority. They need you to accept that your suffering is natural, inevitable, justified by their inherent virtue and your barbarian inferiority. They need you to internalize the conviction that Roman prosperity represents the natural order of the universe, rather than the artificial result of Roman violence applied systematically to people who lacked sufficient organization to resist effectively. The truth is simpler and more terrible than the elegant justifications Romans use to explain why they deserve to own other human beings. They're not superior in any meaningful sense. They're not blessed by gods who favor Roman virtue over barbarian character. They're not representatives of civilization, triumphing over barbarism through moral authority that justifies their dominance. They're just stronger. And strength, as they've taught you so effectively through the systematic destruction of your flesh, your dignity, and your faith in cosmic justice, makes its own rules without reference to anything except its capacity to enforce those rules on people too weak to resist them. Rome's greatness isn't built on virtue or divine favor or natural superiority that makes Romans inherently more deserving of comfort than the people who provide that comfort through their labor. It's built on the systematic exploitation of people exactly like you, millions of human beings reduced to human resources, processed through the machinery of empire until they emerge as profit, comfort, and luxury for citizens who never question the cost of their civilization in terms of human suffering. The aqueducts that bring fresh water to Roman homes were built by slaves who died in the construction, their bones becoming part of the foundation that supports Roman convenience. The roads that connect the empire and make Roman administration possible were laid by conquered peoples forced to build the infrastructure of their own domination, their labor creating the network that ensures their continued enslavement. The marble buildings that define Roman architecture and provide the settings for Roman political theater were quarried by property that worked until it died and was replaced by fresh property captured in new campaigns designed specifically to maintain the supply of human resources that Roman prosperity requires. Every symbol of Roman greatness rests on barbarian grave. Every demonstration of Roman achievement depends on barbarian labor extracted through barbarian suffering inflicted by Roman efficiency. Every proof of Roman superiority requires barbarian inferiority, maintained through Roman violence, applied with Roman precision for Roman benefit. This knowledge should be devastating, but somehow it's almost comforting in its clarity. Your suffering isn't personal punishment for individual failure. It's not cosmic justice for barbarian moral inferiority. It's not evidence that you deserved what happened to you because you lacked sufficient virtue to prevent it. It's just the price Rome extracts for its version of civilization, the cost of Roman comfort paid by people who can't refuse to pay it, the fee for Roman luxury collected from people who don't receive any benefit from the luxury their payment makes possible. Understanding this doesn't make the pain less. Your back still feels like it's been stripped to the bone and beyond. Your future still consists of serving people who see your agony as entertainment, your labor as their natural right, your suffering as the inevitable cost of their comfort. Your freedom is still lost forever in forests that burned 3 years ago when Roman efficiency met barbarian resistance and demonstrated why Romans win through superior organization rather than superior virtue. Your family is still scattered to destinations you'll never know, probably dead or enslaved, or broken by the same machine that's currently grinding you into profit for people who never think about where their luxury comes from. But understanding removes the psychological poison of believing you deserve this treatment, believing that your suffering serves some greater purpose, believing that Roman superiority represents cosmic justice rather than terrestrial strength applied without moral restraint to people who lack sufficient power to defend themselves. You don't deserve what they've done to you. None of the 60 million deserve what's being done to them every day, across an empire that spans 3 continents and depends entirely on their continued exploitation for its continued existence. They're not property because they're inferior. They're not slaves because they lack virtue. They're not suffering because they deserve punishment for moral failures that justify their reduction to human resources for Roman consumption. They're property because Rome is stronger, and strength takes what it wants from those too weak to prevent the taking. They're slaves because Roman organization proved superior to barbarian resistance when the two systems met in forests and fields where strength rather than virtue determined outcome. They're suffering because Roman prosperity requires their suffering. Roman comfort demands their labor. Roman civilization depends on their reduction to tools for creating wealth they'll never be allowed to enjoy. The machine will continue grinding forward, processing human beings into profit and comfort for people who never question where their luxury comes from or what it costs in terms of lives destroyed, families separated, futures eliminated to fund Roman presence that seem to justify themselves through their magnificence. New slaves will replace the ones who die from overwork, abuse, or simple inability to continue functioning as human property in conditions designed to extract maximum value rather than preserve human life. New campaigns will capture fresh populations to feed the appetite for human resources that fuels Roman prosperity and makes Roman achievement possible. Your individual destruction is meaningless in the context of an empire built on millions of similar destruction. Millions of people reduced from human beings to economic units. Millions of lives converted into Roman profit through Roman efficiency, applied to the problem of transforming barbarian labor into Roman luxury. But your individual resistance, even if it's nothing more than remembering that you were human before you became property, matters in ways Rome can't calculate or control. Even if resistance consists only of understanding that their version of civilization is built on blood, that their superiority is just strength disguised as virtue, that their prosperity depends on suffering they prefer to keep invisible. They can own your body through superior force. They can dictate your actions through superior organization. They can punish your mistakes with systematic torture that leaves permanent scars, permanent disability, permanent reminders of what happens when barbarian flesh disappoints Roman expectations. But they can't own the part of you that remembers freedom, that knows their version of civilization costs more than it's worth, that understands their superiority is just an illusion maintained through violence applied to people who can't fight back effectively. They can't control the knowledge that their greatness depends entirely on other people's suffering, that their comfort requires other people's labor, that their civilization represents systematic theft disguised as natural order rather than actual achievement, worthy of the admiration they demand from people they've conquered. In the morning you'll wake and work and serve and pretend to be the obedient property they've created through violence and terror, through systematic destruction of everything that once made you believe you possessed inherent dignity that couldn't be bought or sold. You'll smile when ordered, bow when expected, and perform the careful choreography of slavery that keeps you alive another day in a system designed to extract maximum value from human resources without regard for the human cost of that extraction. You'll function as broken property, because broken property that continues functioning is more valuable than broken property that refuses to work, and value is the only thing that matters in calculations that determine whether you live or die, whether you receive minimal care or complete abandonment, whether you survive long enough to heal or die slowly from complications that make replacement more economical than But in the dark hours before dawn, when pain makes sleep impossible and memory refuses to stay buried where it belongs, when wounds reopen and blood seeps through bandages that can't contain the evidence of what Roman justice costs in human terms, you'll remember what they can't take away through force, intimidation, or systematic destruction of everything that once made you human. You'll remember that you were human before they made you proper. You'll remember that their civilization is beautiful because they've stolen beauty from people like you, because they've converted human dignity into Roman luxury through the simple expedient of refusing to recognize that dignity in people who lack the strength to defend. You'll remember that every marble column represents a quarry full of graves. Every golden ornament represents a mine where people died for Roman convenience. Every silk curtain represents suffering they prefer to keep invisible so they can enjoy comfort without thinking about its cost in human terms. This knowledge is the only freedom left to you, the only form of resistance available to property that must survive to resist another day, the only way to remain human while functioning as a tool for creating wealth you'll never be allowed to enjoy. They've taken everything else: your body, your labor, your future, your family, your homeland, your faith in justice, your belief that the universe makes moral sense, your conviction that human life possesses meaning beyond its utility to people with superior wealth. But they can't take the understanding that their greatness is built on your suffering, that their achievements depend on your exploitation, that their civilization represents theft rather than accomplishment, that their superiority is illusion maintained through violence rather than reality justified by virtue. They can't eliminate the knowledge that every day you survive intact is a small victory against a machine designed to grind human beings into resources, that every moment you remain human inside property's skin is resistance they can't detect or punish, That every night you remember freedom is a defeat for systems designed to make you forget that freedom is... They've won. Rome always wins because Rome is stronger, better organized, more efficient at converting human beings into human resources through systematic application of violence that breaks resistance without eliminating the capacity for useful labor. But winning isn't the same as being right, and strength isn't the same as virtue, and your submission isn't the same as their superiority. Understanding the difference between what they've accomplished and what they deserve, between what they've taken and what they've earned, between what they've built and what they've stolen, is the only freedom that remains when all other freedoms have been purchased with barbarian blood for Roman comfort. These truths won't set you free from slavery. Nothing will set you free except death or revolution, and neither seems likely to arrive before your body gives out entirely from wounds that may never heal, work that never ends, and conditions designed to extract maximum value rather than preserve human life. But these truths will keep you human while you serve, aware while you obey, resistant while you submit to requirements that treat human dignity as irrelevant variable in equations designed to maximize Roman profit from barbarian labor extracted through barbarian suffering. And maybe in some future you'll never see, other people will learn that civilization built on slavery isn't civilization at all. Maybe they'll create societies that don't require human suffering to generate human comfort, that don't treat human dignity as luxury only some people deserve, that don't reduce human beings to resources for consumption by people who never question where their comfort comes from. Maybe the future will be kinder than the... Maybe humanity will learn to create beauty without destroying human beings, prosperity without enslaving conquered peoples, comfort without requiring other people's suffering to make that comfort. Maybe people will remember that dignity belongs to everyone, not just those strong enough to defend it against those who see dignity as weakness to be exploited rather than virtue to be respected. But that's a dream for free people to pursue in times when freedom doesn't depend on superior strength applied to people too weak to resist. You have more immediate concerns that don't extend beyond survival, healing, and avoiding mistakes that lead to Syrian glass and Roman justice administered with Roman efficiency for Roman entertainment. Like learning to live as property, while remaining human enough to understand what that means, what it costs, and why it matters even when no one else will ever know that you maintained humanity inside conditions designed to eliminate humanity through systematic reduction of human beings to tools for creating wealth they'll never be allowed to enjoy. Like surviving another day in the beautiful, terrible machine they call civilization, the elegant system they've created for converting barbarian blood into Roman marble, barbarian labor into Roman luxury, barbarian suffering into Roman satisfaction with their own magnificence. The night fades toward dawn, and with it your time for dangerous thoughts and forbidden memories that make survival more difficult by reminding you of what you've lost, what you'll never recover, what was taken from you to fund Roman prosperity that depends entirely on systematic theft, disguised as natural. Soon the villa will wake, and with it the machinery of Roman prosperity that depends on your careful submission and perfect service, your continued function as broken property that still retains enough value to justify the cost of minimal maintenance, basic feeding, and whatever medical care prevents immediate death from complications that would make replacement more expensive than time to be property again. Time to pretend that slavery is natural and their superiority is divine, and your suffering serves purposes greater than their comfort, their convenience, their conviction that they deserve everything they've taken from people who lacked sufficient strength to prevent the time to survive another day in the greatest empire the world has ever known, the magnificent civilization that needs your blood to water its gardens, your labor to build its monuments, your suffering to prove its superiority over people who made the mistake of believing they could remain free in a world where Rome decides who deserves. The least you can do is bleed quietly, efficiently, and without disturbing their sleep with reminders that their comfort costs more than they're willing to acknowledge, that their civilization depends on suffering they prefer to keep invisible, that their greatness requires other people's destruction maintained through systematic violence applied without moral restraint. After all, you're just property. And property exists to serve Roman purposes, to provide Roman comfort, to demonstrate Roman superiority through its capacity to suffer for Roman pleasure without complaint, resistance, or visible signs of the humanity that was eliminated to make Roman prosperity. Tonight, though, for just a few more minutes in the darkness before dawn, brings another day of careful servitude. You remember being human. You remember that their version of greatness costs everything you used to be, everything you might have become, everything that dies when human beings are reduced to resources for consumption by people who never think about the human cost of their inhuman system. And somehow that memory makes the pain almost bearable, almost manageable, almost worth enduring for the sake of remaining human inside conditions designed to eliminate humanity through systematic conversion of human beings into human tools for creating Roman wealth that justifies itself through its magnificence rather than its morality. The Roman sun rises over marble and blood, over beauty built on suffering, over civilization maintained through carefully orchestrated cruelty that transforms human beings into human resources with the elegant efficiency that makes Roman engineering the envy of the known world. But you're still human, still alive, still capable of remembering what they can't take away through force, intimidation, or systematic destruction of everything that once made you believe you deserved better than this. Still resistant in the only way that matters, when all other resistance has been beaten out of barbarian flesh by Roman discipline, applied with Roman precision for Roman entertainment. Still free in the only sense that freedom can exist when your body belongs to someone else but your understanding remains your own. When your labor serves their purposes but your knowledge serves truth they can't control, can't eliminate, can't purchase with barbarian blood for Roman. The greatest empire the world has ever known needs your submission to maintain its superiority. But submission isn't the same as surrender, and service isn't the same as agreement, and bleeding for their pleasure isn't the same as believing they deserve your blood. Understanding the difference is the only victory available to property that must survive to resist another death. The only freedom that remains when all other freedoms have been converted into Roman profit through Roman efficiency, applied to the problem of transforming barbarian humanity into Roman resources. It's enough. It has to be enough. Because it's all you have left, and having something is better than having nothing, and remembering humanity is better than forgetting it completely, even when forgetting would make survival easier. Even when remembering hurts worse than forgetting. Even when humanity feels like a burden rather than a gift. Even when consciousness becomes punishment rather than privilege. You're still human. And that's a victory they can never take away, no matter how efficiently they destroy everything else. And so, as the Roman sun rises over marble and blood, over beauty built on suffering, over civilization maintained through carefully orchestrated cruelty, perhaps we can find some gratitude for the world we wake up in each morning. A world where human dignity isn't a luxury only the strong can afford, where mistakes don't lead to public torture, where no one owns you. A world where slavery has been abolished, where human rights are recognized, where the worst day of your life probably doesn't include Syrian glass, and Roman justice administered with Roman precision for Roman entertainment. Sweet dreams. And remember, in our modern world, even your worst day rarely includes systematic destruction of human dignity for other people's pleasure. Rest easy in the knowledge that you live in a time when humanity has learned, however imperfectly, that civilization built on slavery isn't civilization at all. Until next time, this has been another journey through the shadows of history, where the past reminds us that the present, for all its troubles, is still a gift worth cherishing. Sleep well, free people, sleep well.